Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. Two things before we get into this. I just want to say I am wearing a top. It's here. It's just off shoulder so you can't really see it, but it's there. And also I've got the window open because it's like 30 degrees outside. Literally 30 degrees in England. What is that? But I am melting so much. Cannot close the window, so if you can hear like cars and like children and stuff, that's that. I would literally melt into a puddle on the floor and I can't deal. So this week we're covering a solved case, the case of Greg Fleniken, or it's actually better known on the internet as the body in room 348. Now this is a case that could easily have become a cold case, just put away in the archives for people to ponder over for years and years to come. However, due to some crazy good detective work, they actually managed to solve the death just 7 months after he died. So Greg lived in Lafayette, Louisiana with his wife Susie, and he was quite a successful businessman. He worked quite high up in the oil industry and he used to travel a lot for his job. He was 55 years old and would go off to work during the week and would come home to his wife Susie at the weekend. Not only did Greg travel a lot within the country for his job, he would also travel a lot globally with his wife Susie. He loved to travel, he also loved hunting and fishing. So the story begins on September 15th, 2010. Greg retires back to his hotel room after a long day of working in Beaumont, Texas. Greg was a creature of habit, so every single night would have the exact same routine when he got back to his hotel room. He would walk in and flip the AC on. He hated to sleep in a warm room, so the AC was always on. He would lay out a clean hand towel on the bed, and on top of the hand towel he would put his BlackBerry, a chocolate bar, an ashtray and his pack of cigarettes. This particular night he was in room 348 at the MCM Elegante in Beaumont, Texas. That night he watched Iron Man 2, but evidence points towards him never actually seeing the end of the film. We know that he was alive at about 7 PM that night. Susie emailed him with an update on her taxes and Greg replied saying, "You're doing good, babe," and that's the last time she ever heard from him. We also know that Greg was alive at about 8:30. He tried to cook some popcorn in the microwave in his room and basically blew the fuse. He calls up the front desk to tell them that his electricity is out and they send a repairman up who leaves at about 8:30. When the repairman left, Greg was still perfectly healthy. Now when Greg was travelling, every single morning he'd give Susie a call just to check up on her, and that next morning she didn't hear from him, so she got a little bit concerned. So she calls his office to see if he's in work, and he hadn't turned up that morning. Two co-workers drove over to the hotel to see where Greg was, and they knocked on his hotel room door but he didn't answer, so they had to get the hotel manager to let them into his room. There they found him dead, lying face down on the rug with a now unlit cigarette in his left hand. They were immediately shocked at how stuffy and warm the room was, and Greg's body had turned grey. An hour later, Detective Scott Apple appears at the scene, and he would be the lead detective in this case until the end. Now when he arrived, he saw the scene as pretty cut and dry. This was a middle-aged man, cigarette in his hand, found dead in a hotel room. There were no signs of any disturbances, no signs of a struggle. He kind of just put it down immediately as a heart attack or another natural cause. From what Detective Apple could see, Greg had no external injuries, there was no blood around him. Greg's wallet was in his back pocket with $1,000 in cash, completely untouched, so robbery wasn't the motive. I mean, you really can't blame Detective Apple for assuming this was a natural death. No robbery, no struggle, no signs of any injuries on him. Heart attack. Greg smoked like a chimney and he never exercised. He wasn't unhealthy, but he wasn't a particularly healthy person either. He didn't drink to excess or eat to excess, but he definitely had his vices. Even Susie, his wife, said that she wouldn't have been shocked if it was a natural death, and apparently Greg had always said that he wanted to go suddenly, so Susie found solace in that. The body was transferred to the Jefferson County medical examiner who did the autopsy. Everyone fully expected this to come back as a heart attack, like there was no doubt in anyone's mind. Detective Apple had already put it down as a cut and dry case. However, they were shocked when the manner of death in this case came back as homicide. Dr. Tommy Brown was the one who conducted the autopsy, and he's done many autopsies throughout his life. There was a 2-inch long graze on his cheek, which you can assume he got from falling face first onto the rug. There was also a small laceration on his scrotum. From the small wound on his scrotum, some bruising had started to appear across his groin and his left thigh. However, when Tommy opened up the body, he was shocked at what he saw. The injuries to the inside of his body was equivalent to that of a car crash. I mean, these were severe internal injuries. He had to put it down to a severe beating or maybe a heavy object falling on top of him, even though there was no sign of that. Inside, Greg had severe internal bleeding. The intestines had been torn and partly digested food was outside of the intestines. There were lacerations on the stomach and liver, and there was a hole in Greg's heart, as well as 2 broken ribs. So this is where Detective Apple's investigation really starts. Greg was a happily married man. He was well liked. Everyone only had good things to say about him, and he had no known enemies. Like I said, he didn't drink, he didn't do drugs, he didn't socialise all that much. So Detective Apple really had to figure out where the best place was to start in this investigation. So he started with looking at people within the hotel. The first person he suspected was the maintenance man of the hotel, who had a history of sexual assault. Detective Apple speculated that the injuries could be caused by a really long screwdriver. Like I said, earlier in the night, Greg had blown the electrical fuses in his room, so they had to send a maintenance man up to fix it. Now, I'm not sure if this was the same maintenance man as the one that I've just discussed. He didn't only knock out the electricity in his own room, the electricity in the room next door, 349, was also cut out. In that room, there were some union electricians staying. 4 of the people staying in room 349 also became suspects. The people staying in that room were Lance Muller and Tim Steinmetz. Apple theorised that the electricians were getting drunk that night, and when the power went off, they got angry, broke into Greg's room and viciously beat him. The only problem with this is there was no evidence to suggest any kind of a struggle in Greg's room, so they kind of said that maybe Greg had been outside of the room and beaten, but still this didn't quite match up. If Greg was being beaten, kicked in the stomach, there would be more bruising and more evidence of this. Both of the electricians denied having any contact with Greg, but they did show an unusual interest in his death. The electricians did say that they'd returned home from the bar that night just after midnight and had heard Greg coughing in his room. Months passed and Detective Apple just hit a dead end. He didn't know where else he could look. This guy had died inside a room, nobody had broken into it, there was no struggle, there was no external injuries on his body, and it was a dead end. Greg's family put up a $50,000 reward in November, but nothing came of that. So Susie then hires a private detective, a man called Ken Brennan. He was a former Long Island cop and an ex-DEA special agent. Brennan had an excellent track record as a private detective. He didn't believe in giving families false hope. If he didn't think that he could solve their case, he would just tell them no. But something about Greg's case intrigued him, and so he took it on. Brennan's first focus was Susie, absolutely grilling her about her husband, asking her every single question under the sun. It became clear very quickly that Susie had absolutely nothing to do with her husband's death, as we all knew already. But at the end of the interview, he asks her if there was anything that struck her as strange about Greg's death. Susie says yes. She says that she was shocked that it was so warm when the people entered Greg's room the next morning, because he always slept with the aircon on and it wasn't on. Brennan then meets up with Detective Apple himself, and luckily the two really hit it off. Together they visited room 348 and Apple shows Brennan all of the autopsy photos, all the crime scene photos, anything that could help with the investigation. Brennan immediately gets the hunch and calls Susie to ask if Greg was right-handed or left-handed, and she says that Greg was right-handed. So Brennan then asks her, and what hand did he smoke with? Susie replies again, right-handed. However, Greg was found dead with his cigarette in his left hand. For them, this completely ruled out the possibility that Greg had been attacked outside of his room. I mean, who would attack him, then go to all the effort to gently place the cigarette back in his hand and tuck it under his body? He'd been alone when he died. They said it looked like he'd been on the bed and suddenly got up to reach for the door handle, switching his cigarette from his right hand to his left hand as he did so. He knew that he was in trouble, so was reaching for the door handle for help before collapsing. Or it could be linked to the AC. Like I said, the repairman left the room at 8:30 that night, having flipped the electricity back on. Maybe Greg sat down and realised that the room was getting warm and he needed to put the AC back on, so stood up to flip the AC on and then fell. But they were sure of one thing, and that's that Greg was completely minding his own business in the moments before he died. But they still had no idea how or why he died, so they visit Dr. Tommy Brown. They queried the laceration on his scrotum and they asked if that could be caused by some kind of steel-capped boot. And Dr. Brown said it was likely that it could be. The electricians in the room next door would have worn construction steel-capped boots. So they re-interviewed the electricians. They even interviewed co-workers who weren't previously interviewed, people who weren't even there that night. Then one co-worker mentions an incident about a gun going off in a boarding house, and Apple reminds him like, no, that's the wrong case, we're not talking about that case. But something clicks for Brennan. And so they rush back to the hotel room and they begin examining absolutely every detail of the room. At this point, Brennan is now 100% convinced that a gun was involved. Then they noticed a small mark behind the door, which previously could have easily been sort of written off as a mark where the door handle was hitting the wall. But they realised that this tiny mark didn't match up with the door handle. It wasn't an indentation from that, it was slightly above it. It kind of looked like a tiny hole that had been repaired. So curious, they head to the room next door, 349, and sure enough, exactly in line with the hole in room 348, they find another tiny hole, which had been filled in with what they would later discover to be toothpaste. If a bullet had gone through this wall, the trajectory would line up exactly with where Greg was sitting on his bed. But still, in the autopsy, Dr. Brown hadn't seen a bullet in Greg. So the detectives go back to the doctor and ask him about the possibility of it being a bullet wound. And he completely denies it. He says there's no chance of this being a bullet wound. It was like something had crushed him. And regardless, he hadn't seen a bullet. So the doctor, in an attempt, I think, to prove himself to the detectives, shows them the autopsy photos in detail. The injury, sure enough, did follow the track of a bullet through the body, and they stopped when they got to the heart. And there they see a bullet hole. Now, Dr. Brown had seen this in the autopsy, and he'd written in the report that there was a hole in the heart. He just assumed that it was from a burst atrium. But looking at it again, he had to admit there was a bullet hole. The wound on Greg's scrotum wasn't a small laceration, a small cut as they first thought. Because of the soft skin, it sort of covered and made it seem like that's what it was, but really, it was a bullet wound. Now the only question I have here, which I couldn't find an answer to on the internet, is what about Greg's clothes? I'm sure if he was naked when he was found and therefore lying on his bed naked, that probably would have been mentioned in some of the articles I've read. So was he not wearing underwear? If he was wearing underwear, surely there would have been a hole in it. Like, the evidence would surely still be, like, being kept somewhere. So that is the only question I have. I'm sure it has been answered, but I couldn't find it anywhere online. So at this point, it's 7 months after Greg's death, and the detectives meet again with one of the electricians in the room next door, Tim Steinmetz. They politely question him once again, not pushing for too many details, and at the end of the interview, they ask Tim to sign. At this point, Tim signed a false police report, and the detectives, now knowing this, jump on him. Tim Steinmetz finally spills the true story. Tim and his two colleagues, Trent Pisano and Lance Muller, were in room 349 the night that Greg died. They were in there drinking beer, and Muller turns to Pisano and tells him to go down to his car and get the whiskey and the gun that's in there. When Pisano brings the gun up, Muller starts playing with the gun, like jokingly pointing it at his colleagues, and his colleagues are kind of like, stop it, somebody's going to end up getting hurt. And Muller, drunk, points the gun at Pisano and accidentally shoots it. Now luckily for Pisano it missed, but not luckily for Greg, as it went through the wall and hit him, making a bullet track up his entire body. At this point, they don't know that the bullets hit anybody, but they do know that a gun's gone off in a hotel. So Muller bundles up the gun and takes it back down to his car. Now after this, he actually gives the gun to a friend to look after for a few days before handing it over to his attorney. Now Steinmetz said they didn't know anyone was staying in room 348. After the whole gun shooting incident, Pisano goes back to his room disgusted, and Steinmetz and Muller head down to the hotel bar. They say that they walk back up to their room just after midnight and they hear Greg in his room coughing. This could be a few things. Either Greg survived a lot longer than they said he survived, or they're mixing up the memories with the previous night, or they simply heard somebody else in a different room coughing. I'm not entirely sure how this hotel's laid out, so that might not be a possibility, but I do know that in court, not much was sort of placed on this. They only realised that something had gone wrong when they saw the body bag being pulled out of room 348 the next morning, but still they didn't say anything. After Steinmetz had spoken to the detectives, he then calls up Muller, saying that he's confessed everything. Steinmetz tells Muller that Greg actually died by being shot. Now Muller refuses to believe this. He's gone through the autopsy reports, he's made sure. He said that at first they thought it was a heart attack, and then they said that he was crushed by a heavy object. He refused to believe that it was caused by a gunshot, but it was. October 29th, 2012, Lance Muller is sentenced to 10 years in prison for manslaughter. He'll be eligible for parole after 5 years. It's likely that if Muller had put his hand up straight away and said exactly what happened, that he probably wouldn't have even gone to jail. He maybe would have served a lighter sentence, and he may not be in the situation that he's in now. He always says that he never knew he'd done anything wrong, but the fact that he gave his gun to an attorney to hide away suggests otherwise. And also the fact that he even felt the need to read up on Greg's autopsy reports just to make sure. To be honest, as soon as he saw the body bag coming out of room 348 the next morning, he should have said something. I mean, he covered his tracks even to the point of filling the hole in the wall with toothpaste. He knew he'd done something wrong. Actually, during his sentencing, Muller was arrested for his 4th count of drunk driving, and this really didn't help his case. After this, he kind of stood no chance of staying out of jail. Sadly, accidental gun deaths in Texas aren't uncommon. They happen quite a lot, and they're, from what I've read, a very grey area in Texas law. So it's very likely that if Muller had just put his hands up straight away, he may have got off on some kind of technicality, but it actually went down as manslaughter because he lied and hid it for so long. Susie could now rest knowing that the man who'd murdered her husband was now in jail. Imagine if Muller had just gone and knocked on Greg's door just to make sure he was okay. That could have changed everything. I mean, there's a good chance that Greg may have still died, but he might have still lived. That immediate medical attention that he might have gotten could have saved his life. I think this is one of the most interesting solved cases that I've ever read about, and it just shows what can be achieved with really good police detective work. You may have noticed that I don't tend to cover many solved cases, but when I do, there's always a very interesting twist in the story. So if you've got any other solved cases that have a similar twist, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and share it with any other true crime buffs that you know. It would be great to get my channel out there a little bit, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.